Thank you so much for joining us today. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I really feel like my Christmas can't really get started until we've all learned about glaucoma and driving. So before we start getting the tinsel out or eating the mince pies, I'm very, very grateful that you've joined me for an hour to make most of this kind of festive celebration of glaucoma and driving. Well, that's it. That's what I'm thinking of it as. As I said, my name is Philippa Mason, and I'm the Development Manager for Scotland for Glaucoma UK. I'm very, very pleased to be joined by Dr Josie Forte today, who is the Clinical Lead and Director of the Plymouth Group of Specsavers stores. Josie's going to be talking to us today about glaucoma and driving. Right, let me just share my screen so I can get my slides going for the first part of this presentation. So why are we talking about this subject today? If you look at the amount of calls that the helpline receives at Glaucoma UK, driving is regularly in the top 2 reasons that people contact us. This is because as soon as you're diagnosed with glaucoma in both eyes, even if it's mild and even if it's controlled, it then starts to impact your life because you need to report it to the DVLA. So this affects both the newly diagnosed patients, but also people who've been living with glaucoma for some time and experience glaucoma progression. This subject and the processes involved can be quite stressful. So we hope today that we can provide you with clear information on how glaucoma can particularly affect your driving vision, how this is assessed by the bodies involved, and the processes undertaken. We will also look at some statistics today and talk to you about how the appeals process works. Now, it's probably worth mentioning at this point that in this type of forum, we're not going to be able to assist you on individual cases. Okay, so if there's cases that are ongoing that perhaps are already with the DVLA and you're back and forth with them, it's not really going to be the forum for us to be able to help you with those specific things. It's more of kind of empowering you with information and signposting and helping you know where to go if you need support. If you do need that extra support on individual type 1-to-1 issues, I suggest contacting our helpline and the number I'll put up at the end, and therefore you'll be able to get better 1-to-1 support. As well as today's webinar, Glaucoma UK also provide a booklet all about glaucoma and driving. You can get that off of our website. You can either download it as a PDF and have it instantly, or you can ask us for a copy and we'll send it out to you for free. Now, before we get going with the driving section, I'm just going to talk to you a bit about the technical side of Zoom and who Glaucoma UK are. Now, we cannot see or hear our audience members today, but you should be able to see Josie and myself. We're also being streamed live on Facebook tonight. So if you're watching there and you want to ask a question, you just comment on the feed and those questions will be passed to us and we'll be able to put them to Josie later. There's going to be 2 short polls during this, a bit of interactivity for you. The first one I'm going to launch now, and then the second one at the end. And these really help us work out how much you're learning from these sessions. So with the magic of technology, I'm going to put the first one up now. Let me check that's all right. Excellent. So you should see that on your screen now. If you could just choose which option, the question is, how much do you know about glaucoma and driving? And the options are nothing, a little, a fair amount, and a lot. I can see you all answering, doing a fantastic job. Keep pressing those buttons. This is really the exciting bit for me. I love this bit. Excellent. That's absolutely wonderful. If you're having any technical difficulties tonight, the kind of most straightforward thing to do is come out of Zoom and then try coming back into the meeting again. There's no waiting room. You don't have to get permission off me to rejoin the meeting. So that should be relatively straightforward. You can also check your Wi-Fi. Okay, so check that just to make sure that's not playing up. And if those fail, try turning your device on and off again, or off and on again, or try being able to get into Zoom from a different computer or a phone or something like that. Okay, thank you so much, everybody, for answering that poll. I'm going to end that now. That's absolutely fantastic. So if you'd like to ask a question today, the way to do it is to wiggle your mouse or touch your screen, and you will see a Q&A option at the bottom. If you have questions for Josie or myself, you can type them in here. We're going to do all the Q&As at the end of the session today, but that doesn't stop you putting questions in as we go along. In fact, it kind of helps me because I'm not trying to juggle them all at the end. Even if you don't want to ask a question yourself, keep an eye on this question and answer panel. If you see a question you really like, you can give it a thumbs up. And the more people that like that question, it kind of brings it up to the top of the hierarchy. And I can see then that's something that more than one person wants to know about. There's also a chat option at the bottom. Don't put your questions in here. We tend to use this for technical issues or issues that we're having to talk about as panelists between us. So try to keep all of your questions in the Q&A. We've also activated closed captioning tonight during this talk. This means that you kind of get subtitles at the bottom of your screen if you like them. This is indicated by the CC toggle option at the bottom of your screen. Now, this is automatic subtitling, so this isn't the best subtitling in the world, to be honest. You have to give it a little bit of leeway. It finds medical terminology very, very difficult. So, for example, it turned trabeculectomy into Rebecca said to me, and it turned trab into Trump, which is not ideal. Just a wee bit about Glaucoma UK. Glaucoma UK is the UK's only charity for people specifically with glaucoma. We work in 3 main areas to prevent glaucoma sight loss. Firstly, we campaign to raise awareness of the disease. We want people to know what glaucoma is and the importance of getting your eyes tested. The earlier glaucoma is diagnosed, the less likely people are to experience sight loss. Secondly, we provide support and information to people with glaucoma and those who care for them. We have information leaflets, a helpline, a buddy service, and a patient forum. We also provide training and advice to professionals looking after people with glaucoma. All of our services are free to access. Finally, we fund research into the diagnosis, treatment, care, and prevention of glaucoma. Now, we're only a small charity. We haven't got huge pots of money, but we have the money that we do have, we put into initial funding kind of for seed research. We get kind of early stage research going. Right, I think that's probably enough of me chatting today. I'm going to hand over to our speaker, Josie. Don't forget to post your questions in the Q&A. Josie, is that okay if I hand over to yourself?
That's absolutely fine, Philippa. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me along this evening, and a very warm welcome to everybody who's joining us. So I do have some other slides I'd like to share this evening. So bear with me just a moment. I shall find the slides. Okay.
That's great, Josie. I can see that. That's lovely.
Flip it into a presentation format. Okay, so you should all be able to see some slides here. So thank you, Philippa, for confirming that. I'm going to talk predominantly about driving and glaucoma this evening. But I'm always aware that there are more than one type of glaucoma. And I, being an optometrist of 20 plus years standing, I kind of take it for granted that everybody knows what glaucoma is, but I think it's always worth just reminding ourselves of the basics of glaucoma. And then we will have a look at driving and fields tests as well. But glaucoma, I think everybody tonight will have an interest in glaucoma, either personally or perhaps be a relative of somebody with glaucoma. Glaucoma is a complex series of diseases, actually, but in essence, it's a condition which affects the optic nerve of the eye. And lots of us will recognize this image in front of us from our school days. The eye hasn't changed much over the years. And on the right-hand side of the picture here, you can see the optic nerve, which is responsible for sending information to the brain. I think what people sometimes overlook is that the optic nerve is not just one structure. It's actually made up from 3 million or thereabouts individual nerve cells. And each one of those nerve cells is responsible for a little piece of the vision that our eye actually sees. So all of the information that's coming into your eyeball, hitting the retina, it's stimulating around 3 million nerve cells. And those 3 million nerve cells that are bundled together and are all funneled out at the back of the eye through the optic nerve. So it's a very complex process, the process of sight. But you can also imagine how easy it is to lose just a few hundred of those nerve cells and perhaps not to notice because you've got 3 million in total. So glaucoma is the very slow progression of damage to the optic nerve, slowly just knocking off one nerve cell at a time until you get to a point where you start to notice you can't see things and you no longer have 3 million nerve cells making up the optic nerve. And there's different types of glaucoma, but in essence, they're all treated the same way. It's all about lowering the pressure inside the eye. It's the pressure of the fluid inside the eye that puts pressure on that nerve that just gradually knocks off some of those nerve cells and introduces that little bit of peripheral visual loss, which we may be familiar with. It's worth noting, of course, and it comes up very often in clinic, people always say to me, is this the same as blood pressure? Is blood pressure connected to the eye pressure? The answer is no. It's a very different pressure. This is the pressure of the fluid inside the eye. I think when it comes to looking at these, let me shift to the next slide there, if I can. Okay, so there are different types of glaucoma, as I've mentioned. Okay, so the key one that we find in the United Kingdom is primary open angle glaucoma. This is a very common one, and many of the people watching tonight will be familiar with primary open angle glaucoma. This is where perhaps there's a little bit too much fluid being produced in the front of the eye, or it's not draining away quick enough, and it causes a gradual increase in pressure at the back and puts pressure on that nerve. So that's the one that we're most commonly treating in the United Kingdom. That's the one you'll have drops for. If we can't manage it with drops, one or two of you may be aware you can have some surgery as well, just to help the fluid and the drainage in the eye. There are different types. As I say, though, there's a closed type of glaucoma where actually it's the structure at the front of the eye, which is just it's putting pressure on the drainage channel, and that can actually cause the drainage channel to close. And again, if the drainage channel closes, the fluid in the eye builds up, and that can also cause pressure at the back of the eye. And then there's congenital types of glaucoma. So again, some people very unfortunately may be born with the shape of the eye structure in such a way that it actually again interferes with the passage of the fluid inside the eye, causing that pressure once again to build up and put pressure on the nerve. There are some other people, unfortunately, who may have a secondary type of glaucoma, maybe brought on by trauma or diabetes or very much more rare things, but can again cause the pressure to build up in the eye. So I think when let's come to the next slide there. So glaucoma, in essence, it's damage to the optic nerve, okay? But it's a very slow, insidious onset damage to the optic nerve. It's just knocking off one or two little nerve cells as we go along. And it's been able to detect which of those nerve cells and how many of those nerve cells have been lost, which is going to be ultimately what's going to provide people the ability to continue to thrive. But you can't see this, okay? In its very early stages, it's really, really difficult to detect a small number of those nerve cells being lost. It usually affects the off-center peripheral vision first, just to make it a little bit more difficult to notice. Asymptomatic, again, just means you really can't tell that you've got this in the very early stages. But nonetheless, no matter how asymptomatic it is, the damage that's been done is irreversible. So it can slowly creep up in you, the damage. And that's something which, again, we really want to try and avoid if at all possible. So just wait, there we are. So in terms of where we are in statistics, and actually, I just have a better, there we are, that's the image I was looking for actually. So just before we get to the statistics and keeping it relevant to driving, The image on the top of your screen here is normal vision. This is a particularly great image. I believe it came from the Crab Labs to reference them. If you look at the picture at the top of the screen here, this is normal vision. You can see cars to the left, cars to the right. In the middle picture, you've got this mild glaucoma. Now, if this was an average person, they wouldn't notice they had a problem. The image to the left and to the right of the car and the blue car on the right-hand side is a little bit blurry, but you wouldn't necessarily detect that as a problem. And in fact, you can see even in advanced glaucoma in the bottom picture, your brain is so clever, it just fills in the gaps, but you can actually see, compared to the two pictures above, there are some very big gaps in the vision. But when you look at images like this, you can start to appreciate why people ignore these symptoms, or perhaps worse, are not even aware of these symptoms. And this is why regular checkups are so important. So that's sort of the things to look out for in glaucoma. Just hold this picture up. So the statistics. Well, we've got about 4.5 million people worldwide. We've got 10% of blindness in the UK and a 50% diagnosis rate. So we're very good at detecting glaucoma in this country, but we still think there's about 50% of glaucomas undetected. So it's really, really important that, again, we get that message out there and make sure that people are looking at these things. Once again, you'll be aware that some people are more at risk than others. Age is always a factor. As you get, I think it's about 2 in 100 people over 40 and 1 in 20 people over 80, just by virtue of being that little bit older, are at a higher risk of glaucoma. Ethnicity, people of African Caribbean origin have a higher risk of primary open angle glaucoma, and from a younger age as well. Family history, again, in the United Kingdom, we have free NHS site tests for everybody over 40 with a close family history of glaucoma, because we know there's around about a 4 times increased risk of glaucoma running through the family. So again, these are all the things just to be aware of in your own family. So as much as we're going to talk about driving, we're going to talk about visual fields. Again, it's always worth just reflecting, and I never want to lose the opportunity just to remind people to make sure that we're aware of the facts, and just reminding our friends and family to go and get a regular sight test. So, driving and glaucoma. People obviously really dread the concept of losing our license. It's more than losing a license, it's losing independence. It's at a part of our lives when perhaps we're more vulnerable. We want that independence. We want to be able to go out and see people. I think we've all lived through COVID recently. I think we all know what isolation feels like. So it is an awful, awful moment to be told to go and get a visual field to make sure you can still drive. Everything's hinging on that visual field. So the questions that people ask, so you go to the optometrist, it's very important. We want to make sure we catch that glaucoma early. We don't want you to get glaucoma to the point where it's developed that it is causing a problem, but you go to the optometrist, you're doing the right things, and the optometrist delivers that news. I think you may have glaucoma. I need to refer you to find out if you do have glaucoma. You go to the hospital confirms that perhaps you've got glaucoma. What do I need to do now? Well, firstly, glaucoma often comes in both eyes, but it does sometimes start in just the one eye. So if glaucoma is in just the one eye for the moment, as much as it's really important to keep up with regular examinations and tests to make sure it doesn't go to the second eye, because the sooner we can diagnose it, the quicker we can almost stop it. We can certainly slow it right down in a lot of cases. But as soon as glaucoma affects both eyes, okay, you do need to start thinking about informing the DVLA, okay? And optometrists will be very clear, I think, in this communication. If the optometrist is not clear, or if you feel you haven't got quite the information, just ask. The optometrist will be happy to ask. If you want to bring somebody along with you just to help the explanation, that's always useful as well. As an optometrist, I always find it quite helpful when delivering information if there is somebody else in the room, if you feel comfortable delivering it that way. What you need to do, you do need to tell the DVLA, okay? By law, if you have glaucoma in both eyes, and this is where the Road Traffic Act comes into its own, the DVLA needs to be informed, okay? As I've said, if you've just got it in one eye for the moment, okay, unless the other eye has a medical condition as well, it's unnecessary to tell the DVLA specifically about that glaucoma. If the optometrist or the hospital has indicated that it's not quite glaucoma, but it's just a slightly higher pressure than normal in the eye, that doesn't need to be reporting, but I would recommend that it's kept under review. If you look at those earlier pictures, which I showed you, you can see if these things do turn to glaucoma. You won't necessarily know about it until it's too late, unless you're having regular checks. If you're a professional driver, you must tell the DVLA, even if it affects just the one eye. Okay, so there's a bit of a difference between professional driving. So people who drive buses or coaches or lorries are in a different situation to the average person with a private car license. So in a professional license, even if it's in one eye, you must tell the DVLA. It's one of those things, it doesn't feel like a big deal not to tell the DVLA, but it absolutely is breaking the law. Okay, and you will be driving illegally. You may even be liable for a fine, or in the worst case scenario, a criminal conviction should you get involved in a serious accident, or let's hope it doesn't happen, that type of thing. And I certainly find in today's world, the insurance company might have an issue about it. So it's really important to make sure that you understand that. Now, having said that, because that all sounds quite severe, doesn't it? Let's come to the next slide. Okay, so I think most of us are fairly familiar with visual fields tests. So you've now been asked, the DVLA has now said, okay, off you go, we've got to get yourself a visual fields test. Now, visual fields tests they're not unfamiliar to people with glaucoma. They are the way that we detect those changes in the visual field, those things that are difficult to see, those things that your brain normally fills in. The way that we detect the progression of glaucoma is on a visual fields test. Now, the normal visual fields test, and it's the same machine that we use for your normal glaucoma screening. So when you're doing a glaucoma screening, the test itself is a little bit more difficult. It's designed to detect the dimmest light that you can see. And so therefore, when you're having your glaucoma examination, you press that button and you just keep going until you can't see that light, and then you stop. And it's obviously done in one eye at a time. The DVLA test is really for a different purpose. The DVLA test wants to know what you can see with both eyes. So you can use both eyes together, and it's looking at the central part of your vision. Okay, so it tends to be the part of your vision which is last affected by glaucoma in much of the time. So the visual fields test we do for the DVLA is different, and possibly you could describe it as a slightly easier test than the one you normally do for glaucoma screening. So the first thing I would say is it's very natural to feel very anxious about this test, possibly because you've often found the existing test quite difficult to do as well. But the DVLA test is not quite the same as your normal glaucoma test, and I can't emphasize that enough. The DVLA test is a little bit easier. So firstly, don't let your previous experiences of visual fields put you off from getting the DVLA version. I've put here as well, it's really, really important to allow plenty of time, okay? I don't have anything else to get to straight afterwards. You want to go in and you do not want to be thinking, crikey, I've got to go and pick up the children or the grandchildren, or I've got to go and collect the shopping, this type of thing. You want to go in, have plenty of time. And there's two reasons for that. The obvious one, obviously, is to reduce your own anxiety. You want to make sure that there's nothing pressing on you. But also, particularly in optician practices these days, we do so much more than just provide vision checks for glasses. A lot of optical practices now are involved in many different schemes, working quite closely with doctors and hospitals. So actually, whilst they always try to run on time, there's no guarantee that they'll absolutely be running on time because of the different types of clinics that they're running. Maybe they've had other emergency people being sent to them from the local hospitals or from the local GPs. So again, you want to come in, have plenty of time, leave a little bit of time for the practice to get itself running, and make sure that you're not rushing to something else afterwards. I would also say, please don't be afraid to ask to pause the test. If something doesn't feel right, if you're just not in the right place, maybe there's a noise distracting you, or you can hear somebody behind you. If you're not happy about that, and it's distracting you, don't be afraid to pause it. You get up to 3 attempts when you arrive. The DVLA do allow 3 attempts. Okay, so again, just take a deep breath and go in, and please, you know, the guys all, I think particularly when I look at my clinical support team, we often talk about people coming in for DVLA tests. And we do know that people do have just a little bit raised anxiety often because of the implications of the driving test. So again, don't be afraid to ask. People are quite happy to help. So what do we know so far? So we know if you have glaucoma in both eyes, it's important to report it to the DVLA. Okay, the DVLA will then, the medical examiner will have a look at the paperwork, and they'll decide, in many cases, to then send you off for a visual fields test. And at the moment, Specsavers have a contract with DVLA to perform that. We'll then conduct the visual fields test, and then we'll send it all off to the DVLA, and the DVLA will come up with a decision. And then there's an appeals process if you don't accept that decision. Now, I'll come back to the success rate in a moment, but just one thing I would just like to try and do, I'm just going to, well, actually, maybe I might just do here is see if I can share a different screen. Okay. Okay, so if we inform, that's what inform the DVLA. So for 93% of people, okay, so 93% of people, 93.5% of people who have the DVLA fields test, actually, the driving entitlement is stamped as being approved. Okay, so it's only for a very small number of people who actually aren't successful. And I think that's also a very important point. Okay, so if you are requested to have a visual fields test, there's a 93.5% chance, according to the most recent figures, of being successful. Okay, so again, try not to think it's everything's working against you. For the vast majority of people, because we have such great treatment, we have early detection in the UK, and then we're able to sort of push people on to management. We're very fortunate that 93.5% of people will pass. There's a small number of people who will be refused. Often that's not a surprise as well. That the people in my experience who have been refused are kind of half expecting it. They have noticed changes in their vision. And then there's a very small percentage of people who will appeal some of these decisions as well. Now, so in the event of an informal appeal, okay, so you don't accept the results, the DVLA will request additional medical information or a second visual fields test. Now, the second visual field test is actually paid for by the individual. That doesn't have to be at a Specsavers store. So if you don't want to go to Specsavers store and to go somewhere else to get that second test, you can have that done. You will have to pay for it. But then that gets sent to the DVLA. The DVLA will then review those results. And if there's any concern about maybe that second result being different to the first, the DVLA will then ask Specsavers to then conduct a second visual fields test, which will be paid for by DVLA, and then there'll be a final DVLA decision. Okay, now if people are very unfortunate, and it's a very small percentage of people that do fall into this category, if they do lose their license, of course, it's not necessarily perceived as a benefit up front, but it does cost about £3,000 a year to run a car. So it should at least be able to pay for taxes and things. It's a change of life. It's not really meant to see as a benefit, but it is all, it's sort of swings and roundabouts thing with that one. But thankfully, it only affects a very small number of people. So just before we go into the thank you and any other questions part, one thing I did just want to bring to the attention of people If I can just see if I can get this up onto the screen here. At the moment, let's just see if I can get that to come on. So on the Specsavers website, there's an entire section about what happens at the DVLA eye test. So lots of the information I've said tonight is on here. Okay, so lots of things about what you need to know and how to book your DVLA sight test here. There's a really nice, easy to read description here. So what to expect on the day. So at the moment, of course, we've got COVID. So we're talking about social distancing restrictions and about how we're going to check identification. So all that information is there. We will need to see some identification when you come in for a visual fields test. Okay, just to make sure it's the right person attending. So we'll need to see some photo identification. Again, the list of information here and where you can get this information and where you can get this identification from is all on the website. There's a very handy customer checklist. Okay, so it tells you to book your appointment, bring your photographic identification, bring any glasses or contact lenses that you need for driving. You will need to wear those for the visual fields test, and arrive as close as possible to the appointment time. We've then got some further information about some of the terminology, visual acuity, actually what the visual fields test does. It explains what we're going to be doing. The test takes around 5 minutes to complete. And then we've got a little explanation about what happens in terms of the process. And then we've got an FAQ section here. So again, will I get the results straight away? When will I get the results of the test and who from? So all of this information is available on the Specsavers website under the DVLA test. So I would also recommend, because it's very difficult to take on board all the information that comes in a presentation like this evening, or indeed, when you're asked to go and get a visual fields test, it's very difficult to process everything in one go, but there's lots of information on its website as well. So I hope that's also helpful. So I'm just going to stop sharing with that one. So Philippa, I don't know, do we have any questions, Philippa?
We have loads of questions. I'm just going to get my video back up. I won't be a second. Let me just.
I appreciate it's an awful lot of information, and you know, you try to keep things on a bite-sized thing, but I'd love to try and answer some of these questions if we can.
Absolutely, Josie. Thank you. Can you hear me all right, by the way, Josie? I'm back on the screen.
I absolutely can, yes.
Fabulous. Best, good to check. Now, what I'm going to do very quickly, guys, is before we go to Q&As, I have got another sheet, which Josie's perfectly lined this up ready for my last sheet here, which I want to talk through, which has got some of the DVLA information that some of the questions coming through, hopefully this will be able to answer. So just so you know, obviously at the moment, DVLA have been going through a bit of a nightmare with COVID. There have been backlogs and there have been delays. I'm sure that comes as no surprise to people who are dealing with the DVLA at the moment. What I can say is that Glaucoma UK meet regularly with the DVLA, where we discuss your experiences and your feedback. So if you'd like to talk to us about the kind of feedback that you're having from your experiences in the DVLA, we will happily bring that to them. Please write to our helpline, send us that information, or you can write to the DVLA yourself. Now, there's questions coming up about people calling the DVLA and having an absolute nightmare getting through. This, as I said, is because they're all flat out at the moment trying to get on top of their stuff. They know there's an issue with telephone calls. What their advice is at the moment, and what we are advising people to do on the helpline, is where possible, email them. Okay, so you still need to register your glaucoma through the government website. But if you're having problems getting through on the phone, and people have already said that they're having problems, the line's cutting off, DVLA are suggesting emailing them. On this screen that I've got up at the moment, I have an email address, which is glaucomaqueries@dvla.gov.uk. Okay, so glaucoma queries at dvla.gov.uk. This information is also on the glaucoma and driving leaflet, which I talked about, which is on our website, and I imagine it's on our website as well. we know that COVID's really kind of exacerbated some of the backlog, but they are trying very, very hard to catch up. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to give DVLA an easy ride of it. I do know they've been absolutely smashed by issues with staffing and COVID issues that so many organisations have dealt with, and they really are trying their best to get back on top of it. But we know that it's resulting in quite large delays. One of the things I have here is please remember, and Josie touched on this already, that unless you've been told by your eye care professional that you can't drive, as long as you've started the process, you've said, I've got glaucoma in both eyes, and your doctor or clinician or optometrist hasn't said to you, you can't drive, you can continue to drive. Okay, you don't need to stop unless you don't want to. Obviously, you may feel like you don't want to, that's absolutely fine, but you don't need to do it if you've not been told to stop, and the DVLA haven't yet told you what you need to do, you don't need to stop at this point. That's probably something that I want to say. You'll still be insured. And if you get stopped by the police, as long as you've started that process, it's not going to be enough to say, oh, it's okay, officer, I know they're really busy. You still have to start the process of making sure that your glaucoma in both eyes is registered with them. But, you know, they're very aware that there's big delays on. Just wanted to say that hopefully that answers a few of the queries that people have got coming in. Right, I think we should get on with the questions now, I think, Josie, if that's okay. I'm going to leave this sheet up with the information on it. It's also got the address of the DVLA. It's got the number for both the car and motorcycle license or group 1, or the bus coach, which is the kind of professional drivers, group 2, and also the website of the DVLA. So, Josie, we've been getting loads of questions for you, which you're a lucky person. A lot of them are about glasses and visual fields tests. Okay. There's some people saying, should I do it with my glasses on? Should I do it with my glasses off? Should I do it with my driving glasses? I was told to take my glasses off. Should I be doing it with on? What is the line? What's the kind of the official line with glasses?
Now, I've just been looking through the questions. I can see lots of questions about glasses. Okay, so the official line here is you should be using the glasses you use for driving for the test. Now, obviously, just because you have glasses doesn't necessarily mean they're for driving. So I think if you get to the sight test and there's a question about, or if you're not thinking you're wearing the right glasses, really important, just talk that through with the optometrist. Some people will try and wear, because it's a visual fields test, people might try to wear their reading glasses. This is for driving, so that might be inappropriate. So again, just talk it through with the professional on the site. Not everybody has the same reason for their spectacles that they wear, but it does seem like there are lots of questions about that. So, and I'm sort of surprised to see quite so many, because it is appropriate to wear the glasses for some people. It might not be appropriate for others, but it does strike me that maybe the explanations are not that clear. And again, I'm not surprised, because I think if you go into a visual fields test for your glaucoma, you would normally put on a pair of near glasses so you can see the visual fields test. That's the normal thing. Like I said in the presentation, the visual fields test for driving is slightly different. So you may be asked to do something different to what you do for your normal glaucoma test, and that might be where the source of the confusion is coming from. But I would certainly suggest that if you're not sure, then feel free to ask one of the optometrists in the practice, and they'll come down and make sure you're wearing the right correction for that particular sight test.
So kind of by the sound of it, what you're saying is we want to test your kind of driving vision, don't we? So it would be the glasses that you'd wear when you were driving. That would make probably sense. But yeah, definitely sounds, I mean, if you guys feed back at all, Josie, but yeah, definitely if you can feed back that there's some kind of a little bit of confusion over people.
I'm not too surprised, because you do definitely wear a different, you wear a very specific prescription for the glaucoma test. And of course, if there's one thing about people who have glaucoma and are coming in for driving tests, they're expert visual field users, actually. So they know exactly what type of visual fields they normally do. So this is a slightly different test, and I suspect that's where the confusion is coming from. But the optometrist in the practice will always be able to answer that question very quickly for you.
Excellent. So we've had something, somebody here said, you said earlier about the fact that, and we spoke about this briefly before, that actually the fitness to drive test, the Esterman test, is actually maybe perhaps a little bit easier than the normal visual fields you get. Absolutely.
I mean, I was using the word and thinking, I don't want to say the word easier. But when you do a visual field examination, for your glaucoma progression, it's in one eye. Okay, so you don't have the benefits of having both eyes together. And particularly when we're examining for glaucoma progression, we're shining lights like brighter and then dimmer and dimmer and dimmer until you can't see the light anymore. And that's specifically so we can see how many of those nerves that I mentioned are still functioning. And that gives us an idea of the progression of the glaucoma. We're actually not measuring the same thing for the DVLA test. The DVLA test, we want to make sure that you haven't lost so many nerves that you can't see, but we're going to do it with both eyes open, not one eye. And we don't need you to be able to see things at the very dimmest point that you would do in a glaucoma measurement test. So I use the word easier with some caution, but I think most people would find the DVLA visual fields test, the Esterman test to give it its proper name, an easier test to undertake compared to their normal visual field examination. And again, this is a common thing. The normal visual field examination is actually quite tough. It's a difficult thing. It's uncomfortable. It takes a long time.
Tiring, isn't it? That's what I find. It's tiring.
It is. The Esterman test for driving is really not quite as tiring. It is on the same equipment. You'll be going to the same people. It will look very familiar, but it is a different test on that particular machine.
And with that in mind, just the kind of technical really, what are we looking for? I can't remember the exact, you'll be able to help me with this, but we're looking for, is it 120 degree of vision, is it, with 50 degrees on each side and no significant field defects or something like that?
It's a much smaller area in the middle. So it's 120 degrees. Oh, actually, I'm going to go and check myself in a moment. Actually, I will check and put it into the chat in a moment. I think it's 120 degrees and it's 20 above and 20 below and 50, I think a minimum of 50 on each side. I will check and put that.
I'm pretty sure you're right. I'm pretty sure I read it. I'm pretending I'm just going off the top of my head, but I don't think
it's okay. But I think 20 above and below, but it's a much smaller area actually than we might be measuring in the normal visual fields test. So again, it's that central area, and don't forget it's with both eyes.
Absolutely. And we were saying with peripheral vision, you were saying about, looking at the car diagrams, and people often say to us, how does driving, what with driving and peripheral vision, why is it so affected? And we were saying things like, well, with traffic coming in from a lane, with somebody crossing the road, with bicycles or motorcyclists kind of coming in through slip roads and stuff like that. Driving is definitely one of those areas, isn't it, where you're using your peripheral vision so much more, and you're moving faster and potentially in a moving vehicle. So much more dangerously. But that's when we talk to people about, people coming off the side of the curb. Obviously, when you're driving, you're looking straight forward and you're relying very heavily on your peripheral, aren't you, to make sure that that's right.
You absolutely are. And I think that particular slide that I demonstrated earlier really brings home how you can easily miss cards actually in an advanced glaucoma in your peripheral vision. But actually you don't know you're missing them. That's the point. If it was black, you would be a bit more cautious, but it's not black. Your brain fills in the gaps.
This is the problem. And I think this is why some people, when they get their result, if there is a kind of shock, because people expect to see kind of black or grey bits where they can't see it. And actually that's not necessarily the case at all.
It's not necessarily the case. And entire vehicles can sit in that space. And then suddenly they drive forward, and then before you know it, they're there in front of you.
Absolutely.
So no.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. I've got something here that says, now these are questions that may be falling into the test area. They may be falling into when the information goes to DVLA, but hopefully you'll be able to help us shine some light, or just if we don't know, then we can maybe find out from the DVLA. So we've got here, somebody said, can you explain the criteria the DVLA used to determine between a year's license and a 3-year extension? So if you get your license back and they say, oh, it's a medical license or whatever, and you've got 1 year or 3 year, do we know what kind of helps make the decision? I mean, is it a case of how fast your eyesight's deteriorating, or?
I'm probably going to defer this one. I'll have to find out what the answer is. It goes to the medical examiner at DVLA. The medical examiner at DVLA does make that decision. It's not a decision that's made by the optometrist. It's not a decision, I don't believe it's made by the doctor or the hospital. This is purely the medical doctor at DVLA. I would imagine, like all the other decisions, they take on board all of the information they have from the various consultants, which inevitably is going to be progression of disease and how quickly that's changing. So without categorically knowing, what the medical advisor does at DVLA is take as much information as they can, and they advise on progression. So if they feel that the progression of the disease is so quick that there might be a problem in a year, you're going to get a year's license. I don't think it's going to be much more complex than that, but it is worth checking, actually, because I think the question, I've just found the question of actually sort of looking for the criteria. Yeah. So my educated opinion would be it's based on speed of progression. But if I can find out any more information, I'll let you know.
That's great. Thank you so much. We've got someone who is saying they've been waiting 12 weeks for the DVLA. Again, I think that's caught up in the COVID backlog, but please email them, drop them a message to glaucomaqueries@dvla.gov.uk. Say you've been waiting 12 weeks, see if you can get some kind of idea of when you're going to hear from it. It's worth it. If you're not having any luck on the phone, it's worth sending them an email. A lovely friend of ours, friend of the charity, has said there seems to be at least 2 field of vision test machines used in Specsavers, and in fact Josie and I were talking about this the other day, and the person that's asking this question said, I've recently found one type much easier to use than the usual Humphrey machine. Why are they different? Why are there different machines?
There aren't actually many machines that are actually qualified to do the estimate test for DVLA. I think it's mainly about competition. I don't think you're allowed to have just one machine to do just one thing. So we predominantly use the Humphrey. Humphrys are the most common instruments you'll find across hospitals in the United Kingdom. As an optometrist, if I'm referring a visual field to an ophthalmologist in a hospital, it's just a little bit easier to have the same machine in high street.
They're sometimes called a Zeist, is that right? Sometimes.
A Zeist is another type of machine as well. So, so a Zeist would be that's more commonly found in a hospital.
Right, okay.
There's a Zeist machine. The ones that Specsavers have are generally the Humphrey's electronic version. And again, that's the one the hospitals generally have. The other one that you'll find in some hospital departments, not many, but certainly you might find it in high street practice, is a Henson. But they all operate exactly the same estimate test. So there would be no difference in the actual test, the lights that you're seeing, and how you see it. That part of the test is exactly the same. The shape of the bowl, the angle at which you might sit might be slightly different. So the ergonomics of it may vary, but the test itself is the same, and it's been proven to be, and hence they've all been approved.
I think sometimes when people get their letters from Specsavers and it says, it says you can get your test here, it might be from the DVLA actually telling them which Specsavers they can go to, and they have the name of the machine, and people often say to us, which machine's best? Is there one that you would recommend? They all do the same job to try to measure that visual field in that area, don't they? So
they all do exactly the same job. The Henson's a bit smaller, and I think it sits on a smaller table, and perhaps it's a bit more adjustable. The Humphrey is a slightly bulkier unit, but it's more familiar with hospitals. But the printout you get is much the same. So it's really ergonomics, I think.
That's great. Talking about printouts, actually, you've just moved us perfectly onto our next question. I've got one here that says, should Specsavers always provide a copy of the test results to take away, or do you need to ask?
I don't think well, generally speaking, I don't have any objection at all to giving out copies of anything to people if asked. Do we need to? I think that's the question, really. I'm not sure that we have to particularly. I think there's DVLA results, because we can't comment on a pass or fail, because that's not our job in this particular process. Our job is to collect the data and then to send that to the DVLA medical advisor, who then makes that decision. That said, I'm struggling to find a reason why you can't be provided with a copy of the results. But what we can't do is tell you what those results mean, because that decision hasn't been made until it's gone to the medical advisor. So could you have it? I'm struggling to see a reason why not. I'm happy to be corrected if there is a reason. I don't know why there would be. But what we definitely can't do, we can't comment on it being a pass or a fail.
Absolutely. I think at Glaucoma UK, we tend to say to people, if you want a copy, then ask for a copy. But yeah, absolutely, because you guys are sending it off for further assessment, you can't comment.
Exactly.
And it can't be in a position where you're raising expectations for people, or, because it relies on more, isn't it, than just, sometimes it's clear cut as the visual field. Sometimes you need more evidence before decisions are made. So no, I completely get that. So let me see my other questions. Okay, that's so someone's saying about a medical license. I had to change from for a medical license. What does a medical license mean?
Where's the
Yeah,
question?
it basically is the person is saying they got 2 letters. The first stating they get a 5-year medical license, and the second saying a 3-year medical license. What I would say, first of all, to this person asking is you need to confirm that with the DVLA and see what the DVLA are actually saying. If you've got 2 letters, you need to talk to them about which one is the one that is, you know, the right decision. Again, email them. If you can, there's a reference number, okay, that you'd have had on your letters. It will be to do with your case. Put that in the email heading. If you put that in the email heading, they can match up your account so much easier. But just say that you're after clarification of what that means. Yeah. But I think with the medical license, it's to do with usually with time restricted, I think.
I believe that to be the case. I think that's just literally saying it's a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 5 year, whatever it might be. It's been restricted for some reason, which again I think comes back to the medical advisory at DVLA.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a Facebook question come in. Thank you. Hello, Facebook people. About how to contact the DVLA. Again, hopefully you can see all this information on your screen. Please take this information down. As I said, the best way is to email them. Somebody's saying, oh, this is an interesting one. This is not something I'm afraid I think we're going to answer. It's along the same thing of your individual case, really. But someone's written saying, my sight's deteriorated from kind of perfect DVLA 3 years ago and now to a 3-year medical license. How likely am I to have my license revoked within the next 3 years? It's so difficult to be able to know these things without knowing about your specific case. And even then, I'm not a clinician. I couldn't judge that. What I can say is that looking at the statistics, 5% of people have their license revoked. Of those 5% that have them revoked, those who do an informal appeal, 62% of those people get their license back after an informal appeal. Okay, so basically your chances of being able to keep your license are still good, unless your eyesight's deteriorated level, and in which case, I'm sure you wouldn't want to be driving, you know, if that was the case. So we can't comment on, unfortunately, it's so different for everyone. Glaucoma is so difficult. Some people it stays the same for so many years. Some people it progresses really, really fast. There's so many different kind of variables, aren't there, that make a difference. I'm just having, I get another person saying, I keep getting a message to contact the DVLA, but I've not been able to get through. Email, don't let them get away with it, email them. I've got a few more questions coming in. I just want to have a look at these ones that have come in. Let me have a look here. Not just the film. Not. Right, so I'm saying here they've had a DVLA visual field test with a guy from Specsavers who could not even wear a face covering properly. And I was so nervous, I dare not say anything to him. This is one of those things, again, I'm assuming in these situations, do people wear face coverings? I think most people in... They
do. I mean, if for somebody's not wearing it properly, and it's, I mean, obviously that's just going to cause anxiety and you're trying to do a visual fields test, take a pause. If they won't wear the face covering properly when you speak to them, just ask to speak to the manager or the director of the practice, and they'll make sure that's resolved. It's something that Specsavers have taken incredibly seriously since the beginning of the pandemic. I remember the very first days of this and trying to acquire PPE and face coverings and everything else. And we've never actually moved away from that. So we're still very much in that phase of wearing face coverings. You'll sometimes find optometrists wearing gloves and aprons as well. So if it's causing, if they're not wearing it that properly, that is an issue. But if it's causing anxiety, which it likely is, just pause and ask to speak to the manager, just discreetly, and they'll be able to resolve that problem for you. But it is something we take incredibly seriously in practice.
Absolutely. Somebody saying here, I wrote appealing a decision to revoke my license 3 months ago and I've not heard anything back. Again, drop them an email, stick your reference number from the letter in so they can, sum it together. There are huge delays, guys. I'm so sorry. I mean, it doesn't help me saying that, but at least, they are acknowledging it. They do know it's happening. And as I said, try the email if you're not having any luck with the other way. Someone's saying here, why is field test equipment so uncomfortable to use? I can never get comfortable using it. This is something that comes a lot, doesn't it? We hear a lot of people.
I don't think it was designed for comfort, Philippa. So I mean, fortunately, we don't have to use it too often. As I said earlier, there are different types of fields machines, actually, and some are just shaped differently. But inevitably, it's about putting your chin into a chin rest, your head up against a bar. It's an awkward position. And I often find that people with glaucoma may actually have another condition as well. And maybe they're struggling with their joints or arthritis. I don't know, it could be many other things. It doesn't mean you'll have glaucoma if you have any of those things, just to be clear. But it often doesn't come on its own. So it is not a comfortable thing to do, but I'm not quite sure how much more comfortable you can make it.
Exactly. That's why you were saying, you said earlier some of the great things, make sure you turn up early enough, you're not kind of rushing in and feeling kind of out of breath and kind of like really anxious. I
can't emphasize that enough, actually. If you turn up worried about something or worried about missing something later, it's difficult, and it's becoming very complex in our practices at the moment. We're managing, certainly in my practice, I think we've got 6 or 7 different NHS contracts that we manage for different things. The average person is just seeing lots of people, but they might not realize there's 6 people waiting for 6 different services. And some of those might be running late, and some of that might have an impact on your DVLA test. So if you turn up with plenty of time, it actually allows the clinic to catch up with you. And it means that if it is running late, you're not then worried about running late as well. So it just removes that anxiety. It's probably the biggest thing you can do, actually.
Absolutely.
Lots of time.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds like good advice. Someone here who's written, we covered this very briefly. It said, are the lights one fixed brightness or graduated, like in a medical visual fields test? We touched on this earlier, saying that that's the difference in the fitness to drive test, is that they're the same brightness.
So I don't think they vary, but I think there'll be different brightnesses across the field. So again, I'm happy to go and absolutely check the facts on that one, but it is not the same as the test you use for glaucoma. Now, in that particular test, they definitely start from bright and they go very, very dim until they get to sort of threshold and sub-threshold levels. With the driving test, it's about making sure you can see that 120 degrees, 20 above, 20 below vision that we've talked about. So it is a different type of test. It's not as difficult. Absolutely.
So although it kind of feels similar in terms of you're using a machine perhaps you're familiar with, the kind of idea of putting your head in it, there is big differences, isn't there?
There is.
Someone's saying here, we were talking about the glasses thing earlier, and somebody's saying, I had my visual field test at Specsavers. I was asked to do one with my distance glasses and one without. I thought this was a good idea, and I actually did better without them. You have up to 3 tests, is that right, for the driving? I think you touched on this.
You do up to 3 attempts. Now, without seeing again the prescription, but it could well be that perhaps you've got a pair of varifocals. So I wear varifocals. I've got to that age now. Now, the reality is I don't need my glasses for driving, but I do need my glasses for reading. And I've got very used to wearing varifocals, and I just wear them all the time. I don't know when that started happening, by the way. I sound like people have been talking to me for the last 20 years, but I now wear my glasses all the time. Now, I guess if I was doing a visual fields test for driving, instinctively, I might go in and leave my glasses on, but I would still be perfectly legal taking them off and doing that test. So again, it's about understanding what the person's prescription is and why that might be the case. So
absolutely. We were saying about the different tests. Someone said, my experience of the moving fixation point was the challenge. Does anyone else find this a challenge? So if the red light moves, is that right, to one corner or the other?
The lights can move, and you do have to keep that fixation point. And actually, the machine's quite clever. So and this is the same for any visual fields test, if you're not looking at the correct fixation point, the machine will kind of work that out, and it does actually produce a reliability score.
Brilliant.
So one of the things that DVLA will look for, and certainly not only DVLA, but whenever we do a glaucoma test, one of the things we're looking for is a reliability index.
Right.
So you often find people just keep pressing the button all the time, because if you press the button all the time, I'm going to pass. It doesn't quite work that way. The machine doesn't always show you a light. So if you're pressing the button when there's no light to see, it will score a very low reliability.
Right.
And that actually is a problem as well. So one of the other things that DVLA will look for is how reliable the test was based on the accuracy of what you've pressed. So it's a good point, actually. One just to remember, don't press the button all the time just because you think it's going to pass.
Absolutely right.
It won't work.
Absolutely right. No, definitely. We've got a few more questions. I'm very aware of the time here.
That's okay.
I'll just try to get one more in, I think. Now, someone said here, how often do you have to take the DVLA field test after the initial registration?
I think that varies according to what the DVLA medical examiner has decided. And again, that will come back to an earlier point that you've talked about with regards to progression of disease. So, I mean, we live in the United Kingdom. We're very, very fortunate. We can detect glaucoma quite early. We can get it sent off to an ophthalmologist and then they can treat it. We know there's a significant amount still undetected. But if you're in that category of people who've had it detected, an awful lot of us, the vast majority of us, will be able to control that glaucoma and keep that progression quite slow. But there will inevitably be some people for whom whatever treatment you're having, it's just not as effective as it would be normally. And so that's where the DVLA medical advisor is getting involved. So I think that's an impossible question to answer across the board. But I think it does come down to how your glaucoma is progressing. Perhaps it emphasises the importance of maintaining regular visits and keeping up to date with your treatment regimes as well.
I think what's coming across today, Josie, I'm really kind of getting to understand is the kind of complexity and the results that are produced by this kind of, seems like a relatively simple test, you know, where's the lights flash, click. But actually the amount of information and the depth and the complexity of information that you're getting out of these results, or that you guys then have to send off for the medical advisor to assess and potentially then get more information on, is hugely complex. It's not black and white, is it? There's a lot of grey in glaucoma. So it's not, oh, if I do this, I'll get a better result, or if I
exactly, it's one part of the journey. Everybody puts all of the hopes onto that visual fields test, but the medical examiner in reality is going to look at the visual fields test not in isolation, but they're going to be looking at it with all of the information they've got from the ophthalmologist, how well you've been taking your drops, what your latest visual fields tests were, what your latest pressures were, how quick is that progressing. The visual fields test will just be one part of it. Now, clearly, if it's a very bad result, then that will carry more weight. Absolutely. But actually, for the vast majority of people, the visual fields test is one of 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 bits of data, which will all come together and will inform the DVLA medical examiner of what the outcome is. And again, maybe that's just worth reflecting on, because again, if you put all the anxiety into that one test, you may actually be missing the bigger picture, but it's just one part of a bigger picture to see.
Absolutely. Josie, that's wonderful. We've got more and I could ask you more, but I'm not going to, because I'm trying to keep everyone to time. I just want to say with my notes, she says, and I realise I put my notes away because I'm too engrossed. Thank you so much, everybody, for kind of joining us today. Here is our helpline details. This isn't the DVLA this time, guys. This is the Glaucoma UK helpline, 01233 64 8170. It's also on our website, www.glaucoma.uk. You can find loads of information there. You can also email our helpline on helpline@glaucoma.uk. And the helpline's open Monday to Friday from 9:30 till 5. And the ladies will get back to you if you email out with that time. Thank you so much for all of the questions you've asked today. I'm so sorry if I haven't got round to answering your questions. If it's a burning question, please phone our helpline, talk to Trish or Helen there, and they'll be able to help you out. Now, we're going to be taking a break over the Christmas period. Hooray, we get some time off. But we'll be back with our new season of talks in January. So on the 12th of January, I've got one called Glaucoma in Focus, Normal Tension Glaucoma. Now, this is one you guys told us you wanted to hear about. Normal tension glaucoma, N2G, and Gus Gazzard, the eminent Gus Gazzard, is going to be talking to us on normal tension glaucoma. So please sign up for that on the website. And the second talk in January is called Living with Glaucoma. That's with our helpline manager, Helen, and myself, and a wonderful, wonderful patient who's going to be joining us to tell us her story. Now, I'm just going to take this second poll, guys. So just hang on just a second while I'm going to put the second poll up, and you can tell me if you feel like you've learned lots today. Right, that should be coming up on your screen. So if you can do the same as you did before, how much do you know now about glaucoma and driving? Nothing, a little, a fair amount, a lot. If you can fill that in for me. While you're doing that, I just want to thank Josie. Thank you so much, Josie. I know how busy you are. Thank you so much for joining us today and answering all those questions and delivering that absolutely fantastic presentation.
Oh, Philippa, thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for the questions. You know, you can never do enough, you know, just educating people and helping people. And so whatever, if you have any more questions that come in afterwards, Philippa, if you want to send them to me, I'll do my best to try and answer. And I would say also that, you know, all the guys at Specsavers, there's always an optometrist there who will answer your questions. But look, it's been wonderful to be with you this evening, and thank you very much for inviting me along.
Excellent. Guys, you'll be getting a survey just at the end of this. Please fill it in. It really, really helps us. But until next year, everybody have a wonderful Christmas and a wonderful New Year, and we'll catch you in January. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.